Conjuring 2013 movie's true story revealed. The Perron family story. The Perron family's sinister incidents were handled by the famous paranormal investigator couple of the time, Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren. The paranormal cases they handled were written into various books. There are two popular books written by this couple, including Werewolf, a true story of demonic possession and graveyard. True hauntings from an old New England cemetery. The Perron family's story was spotlighted by many people after it was adapted into the hit horror movie, The Conjuring in 2013. Ed and Lorraine Warren are the main characters, which is why the storyline revolves around the cases they have worked on. Andrea Perron, the eldest child of the Perron family, said that she and her mother, Carolyn, do not believe the evil ghost is Bathsheba as told in the movie. So, who are the other entities bothering the Perrons? This time, we will talk about the true story of the Conjuring 2013 movie. However, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. The Perron family moved to a vintage farm in Harrisville, Rhode Island called Arnold Estate in January 1971. The 200-acre 14-room house was purchased by Roger Perron and Carolyn Perron from the Arnold family. They moved in with their 5 daughters Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and April. When the Perrons first looked around the house, there was nothing unusual about it. It felt like the house was destined for the Perrons to live in for the next 10 years. Small disturbances began to occur to the family members. Carolyn, who was cleaning the house, would notice that her broom was missing or moving on its own. Every time she finished sweeping the house, she would find a small pile of dirt in the middle of the kitchen floor, even though she was sure she had cleaned the area. She also often heard the scratching of the kettle in the kitchen when no one was there. Her daughters also began to experience spiritual disturbances, even seeing ghosts roaming their home. Some appeared creepy and obnoxious, but others were polite, communicative, and friendly. The demons that inhabit the house have their own characters, from the evil and indifferent to the benevolent. The ghost of a young boy who introduces himself as Oliver Richardson befriends the Perron family's youngest daughter, April. It seems that the ones who often communicate and befriend the ghosts in the house are the last 2 daughters of the Perron family, Cindy and April. Some of the ghosts smell like rotting meat. The odor was often smelled in the basement of the house, so the Perron family members often avoided the basement area of the house, except for Roger. Occasionally, he has to go to the basement because the heating equipment often suddenly shuts down. Roger himself often smelled the stench of rotting meat and entities that made his backside cold. However, he thought it was just his hallucination. One night, Carolyn saw a tall woman wearing gray clothes wandering around the house. It turned out that her 5 daughters also saw the apparition. After the appearance of the woman's ghost, various other strange events occurred more intensely. Carolyn couldn't take it anymore. She was also worried that something bad would happen to her 5 daughters. Finally, she tried to communicate with Roger. Roger is a very skeptical person. He is a person who does not believe in ghosts, as well as a person who rarely experiences paranormal events. He was too busy working to provide for his family. When he got home, he would be so tired he just rested. So the last thing Roger wanted from his wife was, "Roger, I think we have ghosts," because to him it didn't make sense. Roger would doubt Carolyn's statement, which is why his daughters never told him anything. Eventually, Carolyn tried to do her own investigation into the history of the house she lived in. She went to meet a local historian, Mr. McEachern. Through him, Carolyn learned that the house had been built since 1693 and had been owned by a family for 8 generations. Some of the children died in gruesome ways, such as taking poison. 2 committed suicide by hanging themselves, and 11-year-old Prudence Arnold was murdered and raped by a maid. 2 other children were found dead by drowning, and 4 others died of cold. Carolyn learned why the house was so haunted after hearing the long history of horrific tragedies that happened to the Arnolds. She also heard for the first time the name Bathsheba Sherman, a woman who also lived in the house until today. The evil ghost, as The Conjuring 2013 portrays her, was born with the name Bathsheba Thayer in Rhode Island in 1812. She lived a normal life as a country girl. On March 10, 1844, she decided to marry a man in her village who was a year older than her, Judson Sherman. That's why she was known as Bathsheba Sherman instead of her birth name. They were married by Vernon Stiles, a local justice of the peace in Thompson, Connecticut. Their married life was full of happiness. Judson worked as a farmer on their land, while Bathsheba was a housewife. The Shermans made a good living by taking in lodgers to increase their income, since the house they lived in had many rooms. Their happiness grew when their first and only son, Herbert L. Sherman, was born in March 1849. At that time, Bathsheba was about 37 years old. Bathsheba also gave birth to 3 other children, namely Julia, born in 1845, Edward, born in 1847, and George, born in 1853. However, all of them died less than 7 years of age. No census records were found for the 3 children other than Herbert. Most likely they were born before the next census was taken. During her lifetime, Bathsheba was accused of being a witch who sacrificed babies in exchange for eternal beauty and youth. That's why all 3 of her children died. The suspicion against Bathsheba intensified when a baby was found mysteriously dead under her care and supervision. The baby's corpse was examined, and a large sewing needle was found stuck at the base of the child's skull. Horrified residents reported Bathsheba to the court of public opinion. No hard evidence of her neighbor's baby's murder was found. The court found Bathsheba not guilty, and she was never convicted. However, accusations and suspicions lingered for the rest of her life. The story developed into a local legend and folklore. Bathsheba was not a pure human being. Carolyn discovered that Bathsheba liked to torture her maid and let her starve. But Andrea Perron, the eldest daughter of the Perron family, said, "I feel nothing but sympathy for her, nothing but remorse for the life she lived and the accusations which have persisted after her death," in an interview. Bathsheba died on May 25, 1885, about 4 years after her husband's death in 1881. She had even attended the wedding of Herbert, who worked as a farmer like his father, marrying his fiancée, Anna, in 1881. Bathsheba was buried in the historic cemetery located across the street from the fire station and intersection of downtown Harrisville, Rhode Island. Terror from the ghosts in the house began to attack Carolyn physically, leaving her terrified. It all started with a sudden pain she felt in her calf while lying on the sofa. She began to feel her muscles contracting. When she checked it out, there was a pool of blood at the point of impact. After the pain had subsided, Carolyn got up to look for the cause of the pain, bees or whatever it was that she had accidentally bumped into. However, she found nothing. In Andrea's book, House of Darkness, House of Light, she describes the wound as a perfectly concentric circle and adds, as if a large sewing needle had impaled her skin. Carolyn was convinced this was the work of something she could not see. Not giving heed to her husband's skepticism, Carolyn called Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren to her home to get answers about the mysterious pain in her calf. When Lorraine first came to the Perron residence, she felt Bathsheba's dominant presence. When Lorraine described her figure to Carolyn, it turned out that Carolyn already knew a little about Bathsheba's ghost. Then Lorraine told her that Bathsheba had no ties to the Arnold family members who used to own the house that the Perron family lived in. She was just a neighbor who lived on the large estate, Sherman Farm. It was only about a mile away. Lorraine suspects that it was Bathsheba who stuck the needle used to kill the baby during her lifetime into Carolyn's calf. From then on, Lorraine referred to the ghostly presence at the Perron house as Bathsheba, although other ghosts could be present. It turns out that what often disturbs and possesses Carolyn was not Bathsheba, but a ghostly figure with a broken neck. Most likely this figure is the ghost of Mrs. Arnold. Lorraine sensed Mrs. Arnold's evil intentions. She wanted to dominate the house. Carolyn's presence made her feel insecure, so she started to possess her. This ghost often wandered around the house in the middle of the night. Mrs. Arnold's ghost is known to have died by hanging herself in the barn in 1797 at the age of 93. According to local historian McEachern, Mrs. Arnold decided to end her life after her husband died. A farm worker saw her body hanging. He immediately cut the rope and took her quietly to the main house because suicide was highly frowned upon at the time. Mrs. Arnold's ghost was the most evil to Carolyn, but she had to be fought. At least 6 times a year, the Warner couple came to the house, although they were always greeted by a commotion between them and George. So, the process of exorcising the ghosts was mostly done when George was not at home. Despite not getting a good welcome from George, Carolyn began to be comforted and feel safe. Gradually, she began to trust the couple's good and sincere intentions. Carolyn sensed that they really wanted to help with the absurd situation her family was facing. The couple also genuinely cared about the 5 Perron's daughters. In the interview, Andrea also recounted the night of the exorcism. On the appointed night, she saw her mother's body being rolled into a ball. Her mother kept screaming with her body writhing in pain. A few minutes ago, Andrea thought her mother had died, which scared her so much that she felt her heart stop. The ghost possessing Carolyn was so strong that it affected George for a few minutes. George was also possessed. He spoke in a strange, unknown language. Then he regained consciousness and probably forgot what happened. Andrea saw her possessed mother attack Lorraine by throwing the chair she was sitting on from the dining table into the living room. She hit her head so many times that she lost consciousness. On a night that was very traumatic for Audrey's childhood, she was able to realize that things were very frightening. Everyone looked terrified, including the priest who had been invited, trembling in the corner of the room. While the process didn't involve violence or blood like in the movie, it still left a permanent impression on everyone involved. After the eviction process, George kicked the Warren couple and the people involved out of the house. George was apparently worried about the mental stability of Carolyn, who had been violently attacked by something she couldn't see or understand. The Warrens visited once more around 1974 to check on Carolyn's condition, but George would not let them in for a visit. Since then, the relationship between the Warrens and the Perron family ended. After the incident, the Perrons did not immediately leave the house. They stayed there for the next 6 years due to economic problems. George was against the idea of moving house or selling the farm that he had worked so hard to buy. It wasn't until 10 years had passed that George realized the decision to let his family live in the midst of something he couldn't control was wrong. George also told Andrea that he had been afraid all along.